Hello, Honors Algebra 1. It is Wednesday, April 29th, and we are continuing on in Chapter 12 on quadratic functions. And we are in Section 12.3, the quadratic formula. This is the last technique we're going to use to solve quadratic equations. So let's just review the techniques we've learned so far. In a previous chapter, we learned how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. And this is really the quadratic equation x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0 if you FOIL it. And so in factored form, we have these two binomials multiplied by each other give us an answer or a product of 0. And so you know how this works. X can equal -2 or 3. So that's a factoring method to solve a quadratic equation. We also learned that we could take a squared term, whether it's just plain old x squared or a binomial squared, and if it's set equal to some value, they call it value k, we can take the square root of both sides. Remember, this side would be plus minus root 9, which would be plus minus 3. The next thing we learned, which was yesterday, is how to complete the square to solve a quadratic. I'm not going to go through the whole method of completing the square, but you can see here that we know the first step is to bring our constant term to the right side of the equation and to form a perfect square trinomial by having the coefficient of x, in this case 4 would be half to 2, and squaring it. So I'd be adding 4 to both sides. Now today we're going to learn about the quadratic formula. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you how it is created, and so you can have an understanding of it. But you do not have to be able to do this process, okay? I used to, in my algebra classes, it was required that they be able to do all this. It is not required this year. So, but let me just show you how it works. If I take a quadratic equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, a, b, and c are constants. So this could be something like 2x squared minus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Okay, so a, b, and c are just my constants. A and b are coefficients. C is just a plain old constant. Okie dokie. Now, let's complete the square to solve for x. Everything here is a variable. Now, remember, to solve with completing the square, I have to first make sure my leading coefficient is 1 on the squared term. So I'm just on this step, I'm dividing every term by a. Alrighty, and I get x squared plus ba over x. This becomes ba over x plus c over a equals 0. Now, to complete the square, my constant c over a goes to the other side and becomes negative ca. I take my b over a and I have it. And that would be b over 2a. And then I square it. Well, b over 2a squared is b squared over 4a squared. And so I would add that term to both sides. Then I can condense my perfect square trinomial into factored form. And this would be x plus square root of b squared over 4a squared is b over 2a squared equals. Now on this side, what I did is I found a common denominator of 4a squared. And I went ahead and put the negative c over a term after the b squared over 4a squared. So c over a, if I add a 4 and an a to the numerator denominator, I get a negative 4ac over 4a squared. And so this right here, this next step is the sum of these two with a common denominator of 4a squared. And you're in the glare a little bit, aren't you? Okay. Now, the next thing, I take the square root of both sides, and I get x plus b over 2a. Over here, I get the square root of this numerator. The denominator is a perfect square of 2a, so I just made that a 2a here. Now look at this. I've got a 2a on this side, a 2a over here. Last step, just bring this positive b over 2a to the other side, and I get a negative b over 2a, and they have the same denominator, so I just created one numerator over one denominator. And what do I have? What is x equal to? Ta-da-da! The quadratic formula. Negative b. B is the coefficient of the x term. Plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Remember, a is the coefficient of the x squared term. C is just my constant here on the end. And all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. Normally, you would have to memorize that. Next year in Honors Algebra 2, if you choose to go on, you will have to memorize this formula. But for this year, Open book everything. Okay. Now, I went ahead and wrote it up here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is going to be used, we're just going to plug and shove. We're going to plug in the values of a, b, and c into that equation. So, let's go ahead and look at this quadratic equation. Now, 9x squared plus 12x minus 1 equals 0. The important thing about finding your values of a, b, and c to plug into the formula up here are you have to have the quadratic equation in standard form. That means ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. You can have no x term and your b value would be 0. You can have no constant over here and your c value would be 0. But what you must always have is an x squared term. Now, let's go ahead and define what a, b, and c are. A is the coefficient of x squared, it's 9. B is the coefficient of x, it is positive 12, watch those plus and minuses. And C is the constant over here, negative 1. Can you see that? Negative 1. Okay, now let's go ahead and use our formula. Our variable is x. It could be p or q or z. It doesn't matter, but this one is x, and so we say x equals. Now let's just fill this in. I'm going to start with negative b. That's negative 12. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, b squared is 144 minus 4 times the product of a and c. Well, a is 9, c is negative 1. All over 2 times a. Well, we know a is 9. All righty, let's keep going. I'm actually going to pull it this way. All right, let's keep simplifying here. I've got negative 12 plus minus the square root of 144. What does this become? Minus, when I multiply these, 4 times 9 times negative 1, I get negative 36. Well, I'm subtracting negative 36. This becomes a plus 36 all over 18. So let's keep going. That's negative 12 plus minus the square root. Well, 144 plus 36 is 180 over 18. Okay, let's keep going. I've got negative 12 plus minus. Now the root of 180, where is my calculator? The root of 180, do we have a perfect square factor of that? Let's see. I'm going to take 180 and divide it by 36. Bingo. It's 36 times 5. Okay, so 180 is 36 times 5. So I'm going to go ahead. The root of 36 is 6. That is 6 root 5 over 18. Okay, I am so close. I am so close. Now, I'm going to go ahead and factor out of the numerator and denominator. I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor here, which is a 6. So bear with me over here. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to factor out a 6 from the numerator, giving me negative 2 plus minus root 5 all over 18. And then do you see what can happen now? When I factor out that 6, that becomes 1/3. And so my answer, final answer, is x equals negative 2 plus minus root 5 all over 3. Negative 2 plus minus root 5 all over 3. All right, and there's your answer. The book may say negative 2 plus root 5 over 3 and negative 2 minus root 5 over 3. You may use the plus minus symbol instead, okay? All righty. That was the quadratic formula. So just be careful at the end. Don't get to this part and then don't simplify it even more. So what you want to look for, what common factor do these 3 constants have? Okay, in this case, we factored out a 6, and we could reduce the whole fraction. Now, let's go ahead and try another problem. Then I'm going to tell you something about homework here. All right, so let me go back over here. And I'm wrestling with it. Okay, here we are. We have x squared equals x minus 8. All right, problem, not in standard form. Let's put it in standard form first. we've got x squared minus x plus 8 equals 0. Now let's identify our A, B, and C. Oh gosh, I just drew on my jacket. Okay, all right, A equals 1, B equals -1, C equals 8. All righty, let me go ahead and we're going to solve. Okay, x is our variable again, so x equals, all right, -b, which is the opposite of -1. It's 1 plus minus the square root of b squared, which is +1, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. -b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, okay, I just usually put equal signs going down in my final answer. I'll go back and put x equals. All right, now I've got 1 plus minus the square root of 1 minus what? 1 minus 32. Well, what is 1 minus 32? 1 minus 32 is -31 over 2. Now let's stop right there. Can you have a real number that is the square root of a negative number? No. You may stop right here. Okay, don't box that and say x equals that. This is not a real number. So I put here no real solution, and I'm done. No real solution. Okay? That'll change next year, but that is a true statement. It's not a real solution. It's an imaginary solution, but we don't know about that yet. So for Algebra 1, we leave it as no real solution. Now, for your homework, I want to make a comment here. There's going to be directions in your homework that say, give irrational roots in simplest radical form. Okay, we did that on the previous example. Okay, remember it was the root of 180, okay, which became 6 root 5. So make sure you simplify your radicals. And then it will say approximate roots. You might say, what is a root? A root is a solution. Don't ask me why they decided, that the mathematicians decided that a root was a good word for a solution to an equation, because we also have square roots and cube roots and all that. Why they couldn't have picked a different word, I don't know, but they didn't. So when you see give irrational roots in simplest radical form, this is really saying give irrational solutions, okay, in simplest radical form, radical being your square root. Okay, now approximate your roots or your solutions to the nearest tenth. They want you to do that also. You do not have to do this part. You do not have to do that part. So you can leave that off. So the only thing that you will be showing me when you give an answer, okay, is like you did over here, and that is -2 plus minus the root of 5 all over 3. That's it. You don't have to then use what they're wanting you to do is take your calculator and enter in -2 plus square root 5, and then divide that by 3 and give a decimal approximation, okay? And then do -2 minus root 5 over 3 and give a decimal approximation to the nearest tenth. We're just not going to do that, at least not this year, okay? We're going to try to streamline it and keep it as simple as possible, but you'll see 2 answers in the back, the radical answer and the approximation to the nearest tenth. Just do the radical. Boom. Okay, so that's it for today. I will see you at Zoom at 11 if you need help on the quadratic formula. If not, I will be back tomorrow with 12-4. Okay, have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will talk with you soon. Bye-bye.